Jake Miller walked through the crowded halls of Station Wheeler 7 with his daughter's small hand in his. The space station was massive, filled with aliens of every shape and size. Some had scales, some had feathers, and some had too many eyes. Lily looked at everything with wonder, her mouth open in amazement. She was 7 years old, with curly brown hair and bright green eyes. She had begged her father for months to bring her to space. Jake worked as a trade representative for Earth, and he had finally agreed to bring her along on this trip. It was supposed to be a simple visit. A few meetings, some paperwork, and then time to show his daughter the stars. Humans were still new to the galaxy. They had only joined the Galactic Concord 3 years ago. Most alien species did not think much of them. They called humans Deathworlders because Earth was considered a dangerous planet. The gravity was too strong. The weather was too violent. The animals were too deadly. Many aliens wondered how humans had survived at all on such a terrible world. Jake and Lily reached the observation deck, and the little girl gasped with joy. A huge window showed the endless darkness of space, filled with millions of bright stars. Ships floated in the distance like glowing fish in a dark ocean. "Daddy, it's so pretty," Lily whispered. Jake smiled and checked his watch. His meeting was in 20 minutes. "Do you want to play with your drone while I finish some work?" Lily nodded eagerly and pulled out her small floating toy. She pressed a button, and the drone rose into the air. It moved in circles and zigzags, and Lily chased after it with laughter. Jake sat on a bench nearby and opened his tablet. He watched his daughter play while reviewing documents for his meeting. The observation deck was busy with aliens from many worlds, but most ignored the small human child running between them. She was just another young creature making noise. Lily chased her drone around a group of tall blue aliens. They looked down at her with curiosity, but said nothing. She giggled and kept running. The drone flew faster, and she ran to keep up. She turned around a large pillar and crashed directly into something hard. She fell backward and hit the floor. When she looked up, she saw a tall reptilian alien staring down at her. He wore a dark uniform covered with metal badges. His scales were green and gray, and his yellow eyes burned with anger. "I'm sorry," Lily said quickly, scrambling to her feet. "I didn't see you. I'm really sorry." The alien was Commander Vex Rahl of the Corvani Security Force. He was known throughout the station for his cruelty and his hatred of what he called lesser species. Humans were at the top of his list of creatures he despised. He saw them as dirty animals from a death world who had no right to walk among civilized beings. "You touched me," Vex Rahl hissed. His voice was cold like ice cracking. "You filthy little beast." Lily took a step back, fear growing in her chest. "It was an accident." "I said I was sorry." Around them, other aliens stopped to watch. No one moved to help. No one said anything. They just watched. "Your kind should be kept in cages," Vex Rahl said with disgust. "You are not people. You are animals pretending to be civilized." Before Lily could respond, Vex Rahl raised his clawed hand and struck her across the face with all his strength. The blow was savage and brutal. Lily flew sideways through the air and crashed into the metal wall. She hit the ground and did not move. Blood began spreading across the white floor beneath her head. For one terrible moment, the observation deck was completely silent. Then a woman screamed. Lisa Grant, who worked at the human embassy, had seen everything. She screamed and pointed at the fallen child. Jake heard the scream. He looked up from his tablet and saw his daughter lying motionless on the floor, blood pooling around her small body. His heart stopped beating. Time seemed to freeze. Then he ran. He moved faster than he had ever moved in his life. He pushed past aliens without caring who they were. He dropped to his knees beside Lily and saw her face. Her cheekbone was shattered, pushed inward from the force of the blow. She was breathing but unconscious. Blood soaked her curly hair and covered her small face. "Lily," Jake whispered, his hands shaking as he touched her. "Lily, sweetheart, wake up. Please, wake up." She did not respond. Jake looked up and saw Vexrol standing nearby. The Corvani officer was wiping his clawed hand on a cloth, looking bored. He showed no guilt, no regret, nothing. "Control your offspring better, human," Vexrol said calmly. "Perhaps this lesson will teach your kind some manners." Something dark and terrible rose inside Jake Miller. He was a former Marine. He had fought in wars and killed enemies with his bare hands. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to stand up and tear this alien apart piece by piece. But he looked at Lily. She needed a doctor, not a father in prison for murder. Jake lifted his daughter gently, cradling her broken face against his chest. He stood slowly and looked at Vexrol. His eyes were empty, which was more frightening than any rage. "This is not over," Jake said quietly. Vexrol laughed. "What will you do, human? You are nothing. Your species is nothing. We were sailing between stars while your ancestors were living in mud." Jake did not answer. He turned and walked toward the medical bay, leaving bloody footprints behind him. Lisa Grant was already calling the human embassy, her voice shaking as she reported what she had seen. Word spread quickly. Every human on the station knew what had happened within 1 hour. In the medical bay, doctors rushed to save Lily's face. Jake sat outside, covered in his daughter's blood. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply waited. Other humans began arriving. They did not speak. They just stood with Jake in silence. Traders, workers, soldiers from the embassy. They came one by one until the hallway was filled. None of them said a word. They did not need to. They all understood. Back on the observation deck, Vexrol bragged to his fellow officers about what he had done. He laughed about teaching a Deathworlder child its place. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were really called Deathworlders. And it had nothing to do with their planet. The surgery lasted 5 hours. Jake sat in the waiting room the entire time, still wearing his blood-covered clothes. He refused to change. He refused to eat. He refused to leave until he knew his daughter would be okay. When the doctor finally came out, Jake jumped to his feet so fast that his chair fell over. "She will live," the doctor said quickly. "We repaired the damage to her cheekbone, but the injury was severe. There will be permanent scarring on her face. She will need more surgeries when you return to Earth." Jake closed his eyes and let out a long breath. "Can I see her?" "She is sleeping from the medication. You can sit with her if you want." Jake walked into the small medical room and saw Lily lying on the bed. Half of her face was wrapped in white bandages. Machines beeped softly around her. She looked so tiny and fragile, like a broken doll. He pulled a chair next to her bed and held her small hand. He did not speak. He just sat there and watched her breathe, counting each breath like it was the most precious thing in the universe. At the human embassy on the other side of the station, Ambassador Daniel Cruz was preparing for battle. Not a battle with weapons, not yet, but a battle of words and consequences. Cruz was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had been a diplomat for 30 years and had handled many crises. But he had never felt anger like this. A child. They had hurt a child. "Tell me everything," he said to Lisa Grant, who sat across from him with shaking hands. Lisa described what she had seen. She told him about Lily playing with her drone, about the accident, about the apology that Vexrol had ignored. She described the brutal strike and the blood spreading on the floor. She told him that no alien had tried to help, that they had all just watched. Cruz listened without interrupting. When Lisa finished, He walked to his window and looked out at the stars. "Get me a connection to High Prefect Morath," Cruz ordered. "And contact Admiral Susan Clark immediately. Tell her we need to talk." The call with High Prefect Morath was short and infuriating. Morath was a large Kovani with dark scales and a voice full of arrogance. He looked at the human ambassador like he was looking at an insect. "Ambassador Cruz," Morath said slowly, "I understand there was a small incident today." "Small incident?" Cruz kept his voice calm with great effort. "Your officer attacked a 7-year-old child. He broke her face. She will be scarred for life." Morath waved his clawed hand as if brushing away dust. "Commander Vexral is a respected officer. He was simply disciplining an uncontrolled animal that touched him. Perhaps humans should train their young better. I am formally requesting that Vexral be arrested and tried before the Galactic Council." Morath laughed. It was an ugly, hissing sound. "Request denied. Kovani officers have immunity on Kovani stations. This is our law. The matter is closed." "The matter is not closed." "Then what will you do, Ambassador?" Morath smiled with too many teeth. "Go to the Council? They will side with us. Your species has been in space for 3 years. We have been here for 3,000. You have no power and no friends. Accept the situation and move on." The screen went dark as Morath ended the call. Cruz stood alone in his office. Then he smiled, but there was no warmth in it at all. He opened another connection, and Admiral Susan Clark appeared on the screen. She was a stern woman with short white hair and cold eyes that had seen many battles. "Daniel," she said, "I heard what happened." "How bad?" "Bad. They refused to arrest their officer. They think we are weak." Clark nodded slowly. "Then we show them they are wrong. I have 3 warships already moving toward Velar 7. They will arrive in 16 hours. "Make it 6 ships," Cruz said, "and contact Earth Command. I want the whole galaxy to see that humanity speaks as one on this." "Done." "Daniel, my crews are angry. Many of them have children. They want justice for that little girl." "They will get it," Cruz promised. "We all will." As the hours passed, strange things began happening on Station Velar 7. The changes were small at first, easy to miss. Human traders stopped making deals. Human workers stopped showing up to their jobs. Human customers stopped buying from Kovani shops. These were tiny things that no one noticed immediately. But then came the silence. Humans stopped talking in public spaces. They stopped smiling at aliens they passed. They stopped chatting in the corridors. Instead, they watched. They waited. They gathered in small groups and whispered to each other in their own language. Other species started to feel uncomfortable. There was something different about the humans now. They moved with purpose. They looked at everything with careful eyes. When Kovani officers walked by, humans would stop what they were doing and stare at them with blank faces. It was unsettling. Even species that had nothing to do with the attack began to feel nervous. There was something in the air, something dangerous, like the feeling before a great storm. Vexral noticed nothing. He was too busy enjoying his fame among his fellow officers. He told a story of what he had done again and again to anyone who would listen. "These Deathworlders think they are so dangerous." Vexral laughed in the officers' lounge. "But they are cowards. Did you see the father? He just stood there shaking like a frightened animal. He did nothing while I taught his spawn a lesson. His friends laughed with him, but some of them felt uneasy. There were strange rumors about humans. They came from a world that should have killed them, but instead they conquered it. They were small and soft, but something about them made even large predator species feel uncomfortable. In the medical bay, Lily woke up for the first time. She was confused and scared, crying from the pain in her face. Jake held her gently and told her everything would be okay. He promised her that no one would ever hurt her again. "Daddy," she whispered through her tears, "why did he hit me?" I said sorry. Jake had no answer. He just held her until she fell asleep again. Later that night, he left her side for a few minutes. He found a quiet corner and recorded a message on his tablet. He spoke simply about his daughter, about her love of stars, about her excitement to visit the station. He spoke about how that excitement had turned into blood and fear and pain. He did not know it yet, but that simple message would change everything. Outside, human warships were getting closer. On Earth, news of the attack was spreading like fire. And in the corridors of Velar 7, humans continued their silent watch. The storm was gathering strength, and it was almost ready to break. The Galactic Council chambers were the largest room in the known galaxy. Built inside an ancient asteroid called Keth Prime, the chamber had hosted meetings between hundreds of species for thousands of years. Rows of seats rose toward a ceiling covered with glowing crystals. Representatives from every major civilization filled the room. Watching and waiting. Ambassador Daniel Cruz walked to the speaker's platform in the center. He wore his most formal suit and carried a small device in his hand. Behind him sat Commander Maria Santos, his military advisor. Along with a team of human lawyers. High above, everyone sat Councilor Prime Yareth, the leader of the Galactic Council. He was a Methrony, an ancient insectoid being with 4 arms and large compound eyes. He had led the council for 60 years and had seen countless disputes in this very chamber. "The council recognizes Ambassador Daniel Cruz of Earth," Yareth announced. His voice echoed through the massive space. "You have requested an emergency meeting regarding an incident on Station Velar 7. You may speak." Cruz bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Councilor Prime. I am here to report a terrible crime against a human citizen. A 7-year-old child named Lily Miller was brutally attacked by a Corvani security officer named Commander Vexral. He'd pressed a button on his device. Holographic images appeared in the air above him. The footage showed Lily running happily through the observation deck. It showed her bumping into Vexral by accident. It showed her apologizing immediately. Then it showed Vexral striking her with his full strength, her small body flying through the air, her blood spreading on the floor. The chamber went silent. Representatives from dozens of species watched with shock. Even those who thought little of humans seemed disturbed. "This child," Cruz continued, "did nothing wrong except play. She apologized right away for the accident." Commander Vexral responded by breaking her face and leaving her bleeding on the floor. When her father asked for justice, he was told that Corvani officers have immunity and that humans should control their children better. A voice interrupted from across the chamber. Ambassador Trilva, the Corvani representative, stood up. He was an older reptilian with faded scales and a permanent sneer on his face. "The human tells only part of the story," Trilva said smoothly. "The child was running wild in a public area. She touched a Corvani officer without permission." Commander Vexral responded with appropriate discipline. "This is our way. Your way is to break the bones of children?" Cruz asked calmly. "Your way is to let children behave like wild animals," Trilva responded. "Perhaps if humans raised their young properly, this would not have happened." Several representatives from other species nodded in agreement. The Corvani had been part of the galaxy for thousands of years. They had allies and influence. Humans were newcomers who barely mattered. Councilor Prime Yareth raised one of his 4 arms. "Ambassador Cruz, what exactly do you want from this council?" "I want Commander Vexral arrested and tried for aggravated assault on a minor. I want a formal apology from the Corvani government. I want payment for all medical costs and for my citizens' suffering." Trilva laughed loudly. "Impossible. Corvani sovereignty cannot be broken for one human child. We reject these demands completely." Several other representatives voiced their support for the Corvani. The rules were clear, they said. Officer immunity existed for good reasons. Humans needed to accept how things worked. Crews waited patiently for the noise to stop. Then he spoke again, his voice calm but somehow harder. Very well. Since you have rejected diplomacy, I am formally invoking Article 7 of the Galactic Concord. The right of proportional response. The entire chamber went dead silent. Even Councilor Prime Yareth leaned forward with sudden interest. Article 7, Cruz explained, allows any member species to respond to an unprovoked attack with proportional force when diplomacy has failed. Humanity considers this matter unresolved. We will now respond accordingly. Trilva recovered from his shock and laughed nervously. Proportional response? What can humans do? You have a handful of ships and one small colony. You are children pretending to sit at the adults' table. Cruz smiled slightly. The Council should know that 6 human warships are now surrounding Station Viller 7. Additionally, as of this morning, all trade between Earth and Corvani worlds has been frozen. All human goods, technology, and services are suspended. The holographic display changed to show economic projections. Numbers scrolled across the screen, and several representatives gasped out loud. Human goods now represent 14% of all galactic trade, Cruz explained. Our medicines, our technology, our food products. The Corvani import more human goods than any other species. Without our markets, their economy will begin collapsing within 60 days. Trulva's scales had turned pale. This is economic warfare. This is against galactic law. Article 7 allows proportional response, Cruz replied. We have not fired any weapons. We have simply chosen to stop doing business with people who hurt our children. From another section of the chamber, a new voice spoke. It belonged to Observer Keth, a delegate from the Vorlon. The Vorlon were one of the oldest species in existence. They rarely spoke at council meetings, preferring to watch and listen. The council should understand, Keth said slowly, his voice ancient and wise, that humanity's response is indeed proportional. By their standards. Trilva turned angrily toward the old alien. What do you mean? Deathworlders come from a world of constant danger, Keth explained. They evolved as pack hunters who protect their young above everything else. On Earth, hurting a child is considered one of the worst possible crimes. Wars have been fought for less. The humans have not attacked your stations. They have not killed your people. They have simply applied pressure. This is restraint, Ambassador. You should be grateful. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations. Representatives looked at each other with new understanding. They had always thought of humans as primitive newcomers. Now they were beginning to see something else. Councilor Prime Yareth struck his staff against the floor to restore order. This council will take a break for 6 hours. All parties should consider their positions carefully. We will meet again at Cycle 17. As representatives began leaving, Cruz stayed at his platform. Commander Santos leaned close and whispered, "That went better than expected." Cruz nodded but remained serious. This is just the beginning. The Corvani will look for a way out that saves their pride. We cannot let them escape. Across the chamber, Trilva was already on his communicator, speaking quickly to his government. His hands were shaking. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Corvani were afraid of a species younger than their oldest buildings. Somewhere in the crowd, Observer Keth smiled to himself. He had studied humans since their first contact with the galaxy. He had read their history and watched their behavior carefully. The other species thought they understood Deathworlders. They were wrong. Keth had seen what humans did when their families were threatened. He knew what they were capable of. The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson. Never touch their children. The 6-hour break was a nightmare for the Corvani. Ambassador, Trulva received 20 urgent messages from his government in the first hour alone. The human trade freeze was already causing damage. Factories on 4 Kavani worlds had closed because they could not get human-made parts. Hospitals were running out of human medicines. Stock markets were crashing as investors ran away to safer places. Even worse, other species were joining the pressure against the Kavani. The Methrani announced they were reviewing all agreements with the Kavani Empire. The Velith suspended diplomatic talks. The Thornax, who had been Kavani allies for centuries, released a statement expressing deep concern about violence against children. High Prefect Morith contacted Trulva directly. His face was pale, and his voice shook with barely controlled fear and anger. "Fix this," Morith demanded. "Our economy cannot survive 2 months of this. Fix it now." "The humans want Vexral," Trulva replied. "They want him arrested and tried in public." "Then give them Vexral," Morith snapped. "He is one officer. Our empire is more important than one fool who could not control himself. If we give in to human demands, we will look weak. Other species will think they can pressure us whenever they want." Morith slammed his fist on his desk. "We already look weak. The humans have warships around our station, and half the galaxy is watching us struggle. We lost this fight the moment that idiots struck their child. Now we limit the damage. Contact the human ambassador and find out what they will accept." On Station Villor 7, Jake Miller finally left his daughter's bedside for more than a few minutes. Lily was recovering slowly. She could eat soft food now and speak without too much pain. But her nightmares were terrible. Every night she woke up screaming, seeing Vexral's clawed hand coming toward her face again and again. Jake had barely slept since the incident. His days were spent beside Lily, and his nights were filled with interviews and recordings and testimony. His face was becoming known, across human space and beyond. But one message changed everything. "Ambassador." Cruz had asked Jake to record a personal statement for the Galactic Council, something that would help other species understand why humans were responding so strongly. Jake sat in front of a camera in a quiet room. He had not shaved in days, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. He spoke simply and from his heart. "My name is Jake Miller. 8 days ago, my daughter Lily was attacked by a Corvani officer. She is 7 years old. She loves the stars. She wanted to see them up close, so I brought her to the station. I thought it would be safe. I thought she could play and laugh and make happy memories." He paused and took a breath. "Instead, she has nightmares every night. She screams in her sleep. She asked me why the alien hurt her when she only wanted to say sorry for bumping into him." His voice was steady, but tears filled his eyes. "I am not a diplomat. I am not a soldier anymore. I am just a father. And I am asking everyone watching this, every species in the galaxy, one simple question. What would you do if someone hurt your child?" He stopped there. No threats. No demands. No angry words. Just a simple question from a father whose heart had been broken. The message spread across the galaxy in hours. It was translated into hundreds of languages and shared billions of times. Species that had never cared about humans suddenly found themselves moved by this quiet man and his injured daughter, because parenthood was universal. Every species that raised their young understood the bond between parent and child. Every species knew the rage that came when that bond was threatened. The Corvani could talk about laws and immunity all they wanted, but everyone watching that message understood something deeper. A child had been hurt. A father wanted justice. Everything else was just words. On Villor 7, even alien species began leaving gifts outside the medical bay. Flowers, toys, handwritten notes in languages Jake could not read. A group of Velith children recorded a video telling Lily they hoped she would feel better soon. A wealthy Methrani merchant paid for all of her medical care. The Kovani were losing the war of opinion, and they knew it. When the council met again, everything had changed. Representatives who had supported the Kovani that morning now refused to look at Ambassador Trilva. The atmosphere was heavy and tense. Councilor Prime Yareth called for order. Ambassador Trilva, does the Kovani delegation wish to respond to the human invocation of Article 7? Trilva stood slowly. He looked much older than he had 6 hours ago. The Kovani government has reviewed the situation, he said carefully. In the interest of peace, we are prepared to remove immunity from Commander Vexrol. He will be arrested and tried for his actions. Whispers filled the chamber. This was a huge step. Ambassador Cruz stood to respond. Humanity acknowledges this progress. However, we are concerned about fairness if the trial is conducted only by Kovani courts. We request that human observers be present throughout, and that sentencing follows galactic standards for crimes against children. Trilva's jaw tightened, but he nodded. We can discuss these details. 4 hours of hard negotiation followed. Every detail was argued. The composition of the court, the maximum and minimum sentences, the right of the victim's family to speak. The Kovani pushed back on every point, but they were negotiating from a position of weakness. Finally, an agreement was reached. Vexrol would face a Kovani military court with human legal observers present. The trial would be broadcast across the galaxy. If found guilty, his sentence would follow galactic guidelines, meaning at least 10 years in custody. Cruz accepted the terms. That same night on Velar 7, Commander Vexrol was arrested. He was in his quarters, still bragging about what he had done, when Kovani security officers arrived. They took his weapons, his badges, and his pride. He was led through the station in restraints, passing corridors filled with watching humans. None of them spoke. None of them moved. They simply stood in complete silence and watched him walk past. For the first time, Vexrol felt real fear. These soft-skinned creatures from a death world had bent an empire without firing a single shot. What kind of species could do that? In the medical bay, Jake received news of the arrest from Lisa Grant. He listened quietly, thanked her, and returned to his daughter's room. Lily was awake, watching cartoons on a small screen. Half her face was still bandaged, but she smiled when she saw her father. "Daddy, the blue alien in this show is funny," she said. Jake sat beside her and took her hand. "Lily, I have something to tell you. The alien who hurt you is going to be punished. He's going away for a long time. He can never hurt you again." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at him with eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "Will he say sorry?" she asked. Jake felt his heart break all over again. "I do not know, sweetheart," he said honestly. "But what he did was wrong. And now the whole galaxy knows it." Lily nodded slowly and turned back to her cartoons. Jake held her hand and hoped that true justice was finally coming. The trial would begin in 3 days. Galaxy would be watching. The trial of Commander Vexrol was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Billions of beings watched on screens of all sizes as the Kovani officer stood before the military court on his homeworld. Human legal observers sat in the front row, recording every word. Vexrol looked different from before. His scales had lost their shine, and his yellow eyes moved nervously around the room. He wore simple gray clothing instead of his proud uniform. The medals and badges he had once displayed were gone. The lead judge was an elderly Karvani female named High Magistrate Sarath. She had served in military courts for 40 years and was known for being strict but fair. The Kovani government had chosen her carefully, hoping her reputation would make the trial seem legitimate. "Commander Vexrol," Sarath began, her voice cold and formal, You are charged with aggravated assault against a protected minor. The incident happened on Station Velar 7 14 days ago. How do you plead? Vexrol tried to stand straight and look dignified. Not guilty, High Magistrate. My actions were allowed under Corvani military rules for disciplining alien juveniles. The prosecutor, a young Corvani officer named Advocate Thresh, stood and walked to the center of the court. His government had ordered him to get a conviction, and he meant to follow those orders. The prosecution presents its first evidence, Thresh announced. Station security recording from Velar 7, observation deck, camera 9. The holographic footage played again, showing everything clearly. Lily running happily with her drone. The accidental bump. Her quick apology. Then Vexrol's savage strike, the small body flying through the air. The blood pooling on the floor. The courtroom watched in silence. Even Corvani observers who had come to support their officer looked uncomfortable. Thresh let the footage play 3 times before speaking. The recording shows that the human child apologized immediately after the accident. She was not aggressive. She was not threatening. She was simply a child playing with a toy. Commander Vexrol responded by breaking her bones and causing permanent damage. This was not discipline. This was assault. The defense lawyer, an older Corvani named Advocate Morrow, stood to argue. The recording does show the child touching Commander Vexrol without permission. Under Corvani military code, officers may respond to unwanted contact with appropriate force. Appropriate force, Thresh repeated. Does appropriate force include shattering the facial bones of a 7-year-old child who weighs less than some of our food animals? Morrow hesitated. The force may have been too much, but the response itself was legal. The prosecution strongly disagrees. We call our next witness. Hours of testimony followed. Medical experts described Lily's injuries in terrible detail. Mind healers explained the trauma she would carry for the rest of her life. Other witnesses came forward to describe Vexrol's long history of violence. Thornax merchant testified that Vexrol had threatened his children 2 years earlier, calling them pests that should be exterminated. A Velith trader described being beaten by Vexrol for the crime of walking too slowly. The pattern was clear. Vexrol was not a good officer who made one mistake. He was a violent bigot who had finally gone too far. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The prosecution calls Lily Miller. Advocate Thresh announced. A holographic image appeared in the center of the courtroom. It showed Lily sitting in a hospital room on Earth, where she had been sent for more surgeries. Half her face was still bandaged, but she looked at the camera with surprising calmness for a child her age. Lily, Thresh said gently, can you tell the court what happened that day? Lily spoke slowly and clearly. She described her excitement about visiting the station and her joy at seeing the stars. She talked about playing with her drone and how much fun she was having. Then her voice grew quieter as she described bumping into Vexrol. I said I was sorry right away, she said. I did not mean to bump him. It was just an accident. What did he say to you? He called me an animal. He said I should be on a leash. Tears filled her eyes, but she kept talking. Then he hit me. It hurt so much. Everything went red, and I could not see. I could not find my daddy. The courtroom was completely silent. Even High Magistrate Sarah seemed moved. Lily, Thresh continued gently, is there anything you want to say to Commander Vexrol? The little girl looked directly at the camera. Across the light years, she was looking straight at the officer who had hurt her. I just want to know why, she said, her voice small but steady. Why did you hurt me? I said I was sorry. I just wanted to say sorry for bumping you. Why was that not enough? Vexrol looked away, unable to meet the child's gaze, even through a holographic screen. The defense had no questions for Lily. There was nothing they could say. Closing arguments were short. Thresh demanded the maximum sentence. Morrel made a weak request for mercy based on years of service, but even he did not seem to believe his own words. High Magistrate Sareth called for a break to decide the verdict. She returned in less than 1 hour. "Commander Vex Rawl," she announced, "this court finds you guilty of aggravated assault against a protected minor. Your actions were cruel, unjustified, and have brought shame upon the Corvani military. You will be stripped of all rank and honors. You will serve 15 years in the labor colony on Throne 9. When you are released, you will carry a permanent mark of shame that all can see. Your name will be recorded in the Registry of Dishonor forever." Vex Rawl's face went completely white. The Registry of Dishonor was the worst punishment a Corvani could receive without being executed. His family would be shamed. His children would be shamed. His entire bloodline would carry the stain of his actions for generations. Additionally, Sareth continued, the Corvani government will issue a formal apology to humanity and to the Miller family. All medical costs will be paid, and new rules will protect children of all species on Corvani stations. She struck her staff against the floor. Justice is done. This court is finished. On Earth, Jake and Lily watched the verdict together. When it ended, Jake held his daughter close and finally allowed himself to cry. It was over. Justice had been served. 3 weeks later, Jake and Lily returned to Station Velar 7 one last time. They had been invited to a ceremony marking new child protection rules across all galactic stations. The observation deck looked different now. Safety barriers had been installed. Security officers from many species patrolled together. A small plaque stood near the great window, written in 100 different languages. It read simply, "All children are precious. All children are protected." Lily walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Her face was still healing, and more surgeries waited in her future. But for the first time since the incident, she was truly smiling. "Daddy," she said, "can we come back someday?" "When I am bigger?" Jake knelt beside her and looked at the beautiful galaxy. "We can come back whenever you want, sweetheart." Nearby, Ambassador Cruz stood with Observer Keth, watching the father and daughter. "Your species is remarkable," Keth said quietly. "You could have destroyed the Corvani. You had the power, but you chose justice instead of revenge." Cruz nodded. "We are not interested in destroying anyone. We just want our children to be safe." Keth was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, his ancient voice thoughtful. "The galaxy will remember this, Ambassador. They will remember that humanity could have crushed those who wronged them but chose mercy instead. They will remember that you fought for one small child with the full strength of your civilization. And they will remember the lesson you have taught us all." "What lesson is that?" Keth looked at Lily, standing at the window with stars reflected in her healing eyes. "That your kind will burn worlds for your children," he said, "and that the universe should never, ever forget it." Cruz said nothing. He just watched Lily point at a distant nebula, her father's hand in hers, and allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had made its point. Human children were not to be touched, not ever.